Welcome to our attendees. Thank you for joining us for this afternoon's webinar. This is the first part of a two-part series called Back to School Virtually, Strategies for Success. And today in part one, we'll be discussing preparing for virtual learning, which is what a lot of us are doing right now. For some of us, school started this week, and for other people, it may start next week. A little bit of housekeeping about our webinar. First, I want to let you know that we're recording this webinar so we can post it on our YouTube channel later. You will see the presentation on the screen. This presentation is available to you, and we will post it. We'll post a link to it in the chat box. And if you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can type them into the Q&A box. If you type a question into the Q&A, the hosts and panelists will see your question, and we can type in an answer, or we might talk about the answer. And what else do I want to tell you about the webinar? It will last about an hour. We'll finish by 3 o'clock, and we will leave time for questions. Our part two is going to happen 2 weeks from today, on the 25th. And if you registered for today's webinar, you are automatically registered for the part two on the 25th. Now I would like to introduce my colleague, Kathleen Secchi, with the Family Focus Resource Center. Kathleen will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A. And my name is Victoria Berry. I'm also with the Family Focus Resource Center, and we're happy you decided to join us today. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Michelle Heid. Michelle is a board-certified behavior analyst and the clinical manager of Advanced Behavioral Pathways, which is an agency that provides behavior services to people of all ages. So I'm going to hand it over to Michelle, and let's get going. Thanks.
Thanks, Victoria and Kathleen. I'm happy to help hopefully get some strategies out to families that are needing to prepare for virtual learning. I know, like you stated, some families started today and others are going to begin in the coming weeks. So hopefully these are some strategies that will help parents as you're getting ready to launch into this new school year of virtual learning. Today in the webinar, we're going to talk about preparing the environment and hopefully give you some tips there, some tips about starting the school day, some proactive strategies, some strategies for increasing motivation, and how to use rewards effectively. That's a little bit of our agenda. So preparing for learning. What we're recommending is that you begin the schedule similar to when school is in person. So you would have a time that the kids wake up in the morning that is consistent every day, and that you have those wake up type activities that you stay there on the morning schedule, the sample there. You wake up, brush teeth, get dressed, and get ready for school, just as you would if at school or in person. I think we all have been, doing this kind of virtual work from home, this alternate schedule for quite some time. And a lot of us in the beginning felt like this was only going to be maybe a few weeks, maybe a couple months. But now that it's been a while and we know that it's going to continue for some time, it's really important to adopt that schedule that really is very similar to your normal schedule to help kind of create that momentum in the morning to lead to better learning through their school day. So you may want to create a full monthly calendar that kind of lists some of the big events, especially kind of that start of school day. And then have that daily schedule that includes those morning activities, and do things that you would ordinarily do, like prepare the night before. Do you have are you ready for the schedule the next day? Do you have your clothes picked out? Things like that you can do to ensure that you're really ready for the next day. And then review that calendar and daily schedule with your family and your child as often as is needed to really ensure that you can, that they can follow that and that they understand the expectations and what's coming up. We really want to help create an environment for success. And one of the ways to do that is to create a designated space for instruction. So ensure that your child has a designated space for schoolwork, for their homework. You may need to get creative with shared spaces, or if you don't have a larger designated space, you may have to use some things like, we're going to show you some examples of barriers or study corrals or things like that that you can do to give your child their individual workspace, even if you have a small or shared space. You really want to make sure that there's adequate lighting. We know that that is really helpful for ensuring attending and learning. And then try to limit distractions as much as possible. I think we've all gotten used to a lot of distractions in this virtual world where we have our cats walking across the screen and we have dogs barking and landscapers, but as much as possible, if you can limit distractions. And you may want to get a headset for your child, like the one Victoria is wearing, to help them really focus and limit distractions. Some of us may really benefit from that, and others are able to limit distractions in other ways. So you may want to make that an option for your child. And then make sure that you have the needed supplies at the ready. So here's just a cute picture of a study corral that was I found on Amazon. So it's $12.99. You can get a variety of different patterns or shapes or colors or sizes. And these are really commonly used in school when kids are taking tests or they really need to focus. All the students will put study corrals on their desk to really help them attend well. And so this is something you might want to consider if you don't have a dedicated space for your child. Other things like just the school supplies, ensuring that you have school supplies at the ready for your child to access. One thing I really like to get is for families that I work with in home is to get some type of plastic container or something to keep all the school supplies in. They get it out when they're doing their schoolwork, and then they can put all their materials away. So consider how you can ensure that they have access to the necessary materials, but then they can be put away. Here's some examples of what a schedule might look like. So you can get super fancy and do something really cute on the computer, as some of the samples you've seen here, but you can just use a piece of paper and write down the schedule for your child. And you may want to include the times or the critical times that, like if your school day starts at 9 o'clock with your teacher live instruction, then you might want to put a time with that. But other things may not need to have a time. So you don't have to put a time for every activity, but you can put a time for those ones that are in fact time sensitive.
Michelle, do we have time for a question, or are we going to save those till the end?
I'd actually like to wait for questions till the end. So I see it there, and Carla will definitely get to that question at the end. So as we know, we're all kind of, in this technology environment. So it's really important that you ensure that your equipment is really ready to go, that it's up to date, the hardware, the software, that it's, been charged and is kind of ready for action the next day or even that day. You want to make sure that you practice logging in. There may be several sites that your child has to log into, and practicing logging in can actually teach them that skill so that they can be more independent. And you may need to create some visual supports for these logins if that's needed for your child. So, in schools, we have the same thing. They get out their Chromebooks, and then each student has a visual support that they'll put on their desk that says what website they need to go to and what their login is, and even sometimes directions on how to do that. And that way they can be independent with their logging in. And they may still need some support, but at least we can practice that skill. Then you may need to save some of the websites as favorites so they can access them very easily. I know I have that on my computer with all the sites that I access regularly, and it makes it just, a click instead of typing in where I'm going. So if you can set some of that up ahead of time and really make it easy, that would be helpful. Make sure your technology is charged the night before. So, again, at school, we work with learners and they may take iPads back and forth from home to school, and they use those a lot of times as their communication device. And when they come to school and it's not charged, then that makes it really difficult for us. We have to, staff have to go and charge it, and it may take, an hour or so to charge up the device enough to actually be used. So make sure that you're caring for that technology and checking on little things like that. And in schools, we get students to do this, to really learn how to do this themselves. So you may make it a part of your after school routine that they take care of those housekeeping things about, plugging the computer in, or, making sure the iPad is fully charged, or kind of charging it at night. So you can make those little skills just part of their routine, so they're learning to do that themselves. It's actually a really important skill these days to be able to manage your technology. So how do we start the school day off right? Well, in schools, these are similar things to what we do when we start the school day in schools. We want to first clear the learning space. So when we have, students, we're sitting at a desk and we're trying to teach, if there's materials all over the desk, then it's really hard for them to focus on just the materials that we're using for that activity. So clear the learning space. Then you may want to do an overview of that daily schedule. So, what is the student going to be doing throughout the day? When is their next break coming? So they kind of have that understanding of what's coming up. And then you want to, of course, gather the needed supplies for the first activity. And if you want to stay ahead of the game, then you may want to gather the supplies then for the next activity, so that you're kind of ready with activity number 1, and then you have activity number 2 kind of waiting. So that's something that, again, we do in schools to ensure that students don't have a lot of downtime in between their activities, that we kind of have what is needed and ready to go. And we can clear activity 1 and bring in activity 2, and then just kind of keep going. So really important to make sure all the supplies that are needed are available for the day. So, they have access to the pencils and, chargers if they need them, or a mouse if they need them, that they have those supplies that are needed for the day. And then just go ahead and get started. And you're going to learn as you go. You're going to learn what works. And these are suggestions, but every family is very different. So you need to figure out what works for your family, and then adopt those strategies that are successful in your household. But hopefully through the presentation today, you're going to get some of those ideas. So I really am a full believer in a schedule needs to be written and posted. I know a lot of people just review the schedule verbally with people and with students. I find that when we're in classrooms where it's written down and it's posted, it's much more effective at helping kids get through their day effectively. A lot of classrooms use timers. That's something that I would encourage you to try at home, is to use a timer both for preferred and non-preferred activities, or especially when there's a critical deadline. So actually right before this webinar, I was doing another activity and knew that I had to come over to the webinar and I wanted to be on time. So I set a timer so that I would be sure not to miss that, just, in case I wasn't attending like I should have been. Good thing I was, but visual supports can also be really helpful. So we're going to talk about those a little bit more. Something for a lot of our kids, we may need to break up tasks. So if the teacher assigns something, or something's just a little bit too long, and your child can work for 45 minutes or 15 minutes, not 45 minutes, then break that task up into several parts. And you really want to make sure that you include breaks in your schedule. Students are used to moving about the school campus. They get up, they go to lunch, they go to recess, they move, from their classroom to the library. And then the teachers typically always include a lot of breaks and movement breaks within the schedule, even if they don't move about the campus. But you really want to make sure that you include those breaks in the schedule, even if just to get up and get a drink of water, or to get up and move about the house and then go back to your learning environment. It really can kind of help break up the day. So visual supports, I think, are really, really critical. I use them for myself like constantly, and for my son, they were always really helpful too. They really just act as reminders. So it can be something as simple as a sticky note about, a message about an assignment or a reminder about school. I'll do these for myself. Remember to run to Target and get milk, and I'll put a sticky note on the back door. So, just think of how you might be able to use these. I know for my son, using a sticky note, he would be much more likely to follow the direction on the sticky note than if I told him what to do. So, think about how you can kind of use those visual supports or notes in an effective manner. But they can be more permanent reminders like expectations for school or family rules. So something like what you're seeing here is a simple, reminder about the school day. Be dressed and ready for virtual learning. I think that being dressed is probably really important. Get my assignments turned in, focus, and when I finish my work, I can play. So those are just some like general reminders. And then the other one you see is something we created that follows along with one of our local schools. They have a lot of these Helmers Huskies things that they do, and they're kind of embedded into their school day. And so if you can adopt some of those at home while you're doing the virtual learning, then your child is going to go back to school and already be familiar with those things that they're being taught. And in fact, if they were at the same school last year, it's likely that they're already familiar with a lot of those. So if you can incorporate those kind of school expectations that are coming from the teacher or coming from school, that might be really helpful. We know that students are struggling with motivation. And so we just want to give some tips. You can identify rewards that your child is only going to earn for school-related behaviors. So if there's a special treat or a special activity that they really like, you can kind of reserve that and withhold it and only give it for those school-related behaviors. So maybe, it's a special trip to get an ice cream cone, or it's a really special activity that they like to do with dad or with their older sibling. And then we don't really allow that activity unless they've earned it for school. So if you can think about something that you can withhold like that, that might be really good. A lot of parents use things like access to free time on technology or video games. And if you're going to do something like that, you can give a little bit every day. So maybe give 15 minutes of video games every day, but that they can earn additional time above those 15 minutes for school-related behaviors. That's also something that you can do if you don't want to fully withhold something altogether. I don't ever think it's really a good idea to fully withhold your child's most favorite thing, because they're just so focused on wanting that it can be really difficult. So, think about that. You need to make sure your child is actually earning the rewards. If it's too hard to earn, then they're not likely to continue to be motivated by it. So you may have to make it easier for them to earn a reward. So you kind of lower the criteria a little bit, have them earn it. And once they're earning it often, then you can again increase, what it takes to earn it. Rewards should be really daily or even more frequent. So you can, and we're going to talk about ways to kind of give rewards throughout the day that lead to larger rewards. But I think a lot of parents that I work with will say, well, they're going to earn a reward at the end of the week or the end of the month. Well, it's often much too long for the child to continue working towards that. And sometimes even by the time they get there, they don't want that reward anymore anyway, because we know that kids and their attention spans are so short. So just try to think of ways that you can really reward frequently throughout the day, or at least once a day. So rewards can be really anything that you can kind of think of that your child might like, and things that you may be able to withhold until they've earned them. And then adding in those rewards periodically throughout the day, it really does help break up those school-related activities. So they're kind of earning throughout the day, and they're getting that reinforcement, and then they're better able to get back to task and go back to the schoolwork if that reward is used appropriately. Meaning we're not giving something that's then distracting them; they can't remove themselves from it. So sometimes that technology can't be given throughout the day. So you can't give video games throughout the day because they can't transition away from it. You have to make sure that the reward is something also that they can transition back to school from. And you can use individualized rewards. So if you have one child, you may just have an individualized reward system for them. If you have 3 children, you may have an individualized reward system for all 3 of your children, but it may be a little bit different for all 3 of them. But you can also think of ways that you can do this for the whole family. I was working with a family early on in my career, and they had 2 boys, 2 brothers, and the brothers, of course, like a lot of brothers do, were kind of constantly at each other. I wouldn't call it fighting, but a lot of bickering and a lot of interactions that weren't really positive. And so we set up a system where they earned rewards when they played nicely together or worked together. And they actually earned marbles that we put in a jar. And it was simply for activities that they did together. So if one child helped with something, they may not get a marble, but if both kids helped something like set the table, then they would earn those marbles because they were working together. And this really facilitated a lot of the boys working together, playing together, and interacting in a positive way. And those marbles could be given just periodically throughout the day, and then they earned a joint reward for that. When you're using rewards, you really want to make sure that you're keeping it very easy and simple. Something like using a tokens chart or a sticker chart. You also want to make sure that you vary the rewards to keep kids interested, because if you just give them the same reward over and over, it's kind of like if you just keep saying good job, good job, good job, like it's really boring. But if you say, wow, I'm really proud of you, attaboy, I knew you could do it, and you kind of vary that, the way that you say that, it keeps their interest. And then another really great thing that you can do is just let them choose their own rewards. So you may, sit down and ask them what do they want to earn, or help get their help in kind of designing a system that works. And then you can also use a reward menu, which is, a variety of things that they can choose from, again, so they kind of don't get bored. And you can design reward systems for kids of really any age. In fact, I could design a reward system for Victoria and Kathleen to increase their positive behaviors if they had something that they wanted to work on. And it wouldn't be, marbles in a jar, but it would be something meaningful for them. So you really can use this for kids of any age. It just has to be adapted. You don't want to use, a sticker chart for a 19-year-old possibly, although they might like it. And if they do, then there's not a problem with it, but you want to adapt it to the age of the child. I had a really great system for an older child I worked with, and he earned poker chips, and he just thought that was like the coolest thing ever. And we bought poker chips that were the same color as his school colors, made them even cooler. So he thought that was a really great system. So something simple like this, these are just things that you can download from the internet, just, fill them up with the stickers as they go. So pretty simple. This is one that we made, that you make little tokens out of characters, and then they earn those as they go on. Something like this, and the sticker charts too, sometimes it's just exciting for the kids to see like which sticker they're going to get or which token they're going to earn. And I think some of that novelty of just, which troll am I going to earn or which sticker am I going to earn is exciting and kind of keeps them moving in the right direction. So that that kind of excitement, instead of like if we had a chart like this and it was just stars and they were all stars, the stars kind of get boring after a while. But when they're characters and they're always something new, it can be kind of fun. So this is how the reward chart might work, where you put in a picture of the reward they're working for in the box where it says I'm working for, and then they place those tokens along the bottom. Now, well, we're going to be really fancy and we're going to make these with lamination and Velcro, and they're going to look great. But if you're at home and you can't do that, you can print this on a piece of paper and you can draw in the tokens. I had a student in school a couple of years ago, and he always wanted us to draw something for his tokens. And it was something as easy as a star or a happy face, or he would ask us to write a new record, or you did it, or little sayings like this that he had heard other places. And one day I was working with him and he actually said, I want you to draw a birthday cake oh no, I'm not really good at drawing. So birthday cake was really taxing my skills, but he was really happy with the birthday cake that I drew. So you can do things that are pretty simple. So when you set up a token system, you just want to set the expectations of how the tokens are going to be earned. So what behaviors are going to earn those tokens? Finishing assignments, or staying on the virtual learning the whole time. Maybe that's something that earns tokens, because I'm hearing that kids are having problems with even just sitting through the virtual session the whole time. And then you want to place the tokens in a jar or box as they're earned. Like, place them in some container, because if you don't, they might just get lost. So you kind of want to have a place where the kids keep them. And then they can exchange them from a menu or earn one big reward. Some people will say, we'll set up systems where, 10 tokens for this reward and only 5 tokens for this smaller reward. Those get a little bit more complex, but that might work for some kids and some families. Or you can just say, anything on this list is, 5 tokens or 10 tokens, and then they can just exchange them. You want to make sure that you have ability to exchange often, because if it's only once a week, that's too long. It may need to be more frequent to have them earning those rewards more often. And then again, like I said, you can have multiple children earning joint rewards. So maybe you have, they earn a marble if they do something great, but they earn 2 if they are doing it with their sibling, or if they're playing nicely together. So you can just kind of enhance the rewards to reward that cooperative behavior between kids. These are some examples of what tokens might be. They might be like we've talked about, marbles or poker chips or tickets, or these are just bingo counters, things you can buy at Oriental Trading Company, or something as simple as, craft poof balls, whatever you want to use or whatever might work for your child. I've even, made these where I just print them out, something that I designed, and just, print them out, and that's what you use. So you can really use whatever you want. In fact, you could sit down as a craft activity and make tokens with your child where they get to draw on what they want and they get to design them, and then you kind of take them and dole them out over time. So it can be really fancy or it can be really easy. So a simple recap is to prepare the schedule and the environment. I think that those are really, really important. And like I said, the schedule needs to be written out and posted, and you need to review it. And I would say review it the night before, review it in the morning. And it doesn't have to be, a thorough review where we're reviewing every step of it, but we're just kind of orienting kids to it. We're reviewing what's coming up next, so they understand the expectations, they understand what's coming up, they understand what they're going to be doing throughout the day, and then they can go back to it and reference it. If you have a child who's not yet reading, you can still make a schedule and still put on simple words. If you can't do pictures, if you can do pictures, that's great, but if you can't do pictures, you can still write it out with them and explain it to them, and they will oftentimes start really understanding that, even though they're not able to yet read the words that are written there. But you'll be surprised if you do that repeatedly, they might really kind of catch on to what that means. And I've had people of all ages who don't read, and we do schedules with them. And sometimes we just do little doodles next to it, next to the word, to kind of represent what that is. If we're kind of on the go and out in the community, I've taught lots of people how to do that. So you can do this even with people that aren't reading. But really important is to prepare the environment. Make sure they have a space where they can work. If it's a shared space, you can use, some of those study corrals and things like that to section off the space. If you don't, need to do something like that, you may need to, if you have multiple children, do something like use masking tape to, section off different spaces of a shared table or desk. What I love about the study corrals is they fold up and they just get put away. So they can be brought out for the school day along with their school supplies, and then they can be put away after the school day is over. And the kids can really get involved in doing that themselves. But just really make sure that you're preparing the environment, including ensuring that they have access to all the necessary supplies that they need. And then you want to review the expectations with your child. So, what are the expectations for virtual learning? What, even something like what they should be wearing. I hear that's a big concern. Where that virtual learning is going to take place. You're going to sit at your desk or you're going to sit at the dining room table so that the next morning they're not like, hey, I want to do it from my bed. And we all know that that might not be a great place to access your learning. So review those expectations with them. And you may need to have some discussions about compromise. If you do a great job at the dining room table Monday and Tuesday, maybe you can do it from your bedroom on Wednesday or Thursday or something like that to, kind of compromise and make a schedule that's involving your child, because then you're creating that buy-in where they're a part of the decision-making and that discussion. And then you want to make sure that you create and post any visual supports that are needed. So I say, post anything that they need permanently, and then make available anything that they may need just, temporarily. So if it's the login information, you might not need to post that. You may just be able to make it available when they're logging in, and then something again that they can put away so you can really kind of clear that learning space. But something like a calendar or the family, expectations of behavior or virtual learning, those might be something that you leave up all of the time, and really teach them to access that. And you can really teach kids to use that calendar and use the schedule, and they can really make it their own. I had a mom a long time ago who was really worried that her child was going to get really dependent on this calendar that he was using. And, we kind of talked about how his skills had progressed over time. We had started making the calendar for him and just showing him, because he was having really challenging behavior when being told no, that he couldn't do certain things. So we would put them on the calendar and show him when they were happening. And then he started referencing the calendar on his own. And then he started putting things on the calendar. And then he actually learned to do a Google Calendar on his own, and he could print that from his computer. And I just thought that's a great lifelong skill that this little guy now has. I mean, I think he was 8 or 9 at the time. So really developmentally fairly ahead in that skill, but he really enjoyed doing that. And I thought, well, this is a great skill. He's learning to plan activities. He's planning out his day. He's putting things on the calendar that he wants to do. And that's what we all do as adults. I can tell you, if I don't have my calendar and my schedule when I wake up in the morning, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. So think about how you can really teach those skills over time. And what we're hearing from a lot of families right now, we're hearing that this is really difficult. We all know this is really, really tasked parents with something, more difficult than we ever imagined. I think in keeping your kids home and balancing the virtual learning with the regular responsibilities of parenting and adult life, we know that it's been extremely challenging. We hope these tips help a little bit. But some of the good that we're hearing is that kids are really learning a lot of really great independent skills, because they kind of have to at this point. They have to learn to log in on their own. They have to learn to go get a simple snack. They have to learn to, brush their teeth more on their own, because mom and dad are really, at their limit as far as how much they can help, because they're spreading that help so far throughout the day. So really think about what your child might be able to learn independently during this time, and maybe try to focus on that, because we have heard some really great success stories. I heard a mom yesterday tell me that her son has been like goal setting on his own this summer, and been doing those things, and the goals were funny. The goals were pass a certain level on his video game and walk a certain distance on the treadmill. But he was setting those himself, and he was sharing them with his family, and then he was going and achieving them and then reporting back about it. Again, that's a great lifelong skill that he's developed during this time. So last but not least, you want to really make sure that you set up a reward system, something that's easy to understand, simple to follow. You don't want to make something so complex that you really start to struggle with even implementing it. So make sure that it's something that you can do, the parents can do. It's not so complex that after a week of doing it, you're just going to be so tired of actually managing the reward system that you're going to abandon it. So make it something easy that you can do. And then make sure it's something that the kids can understand, that it's, it's simple to their level that they can kind of follow. And sometimes we get a lot of pushback on giving rewards. Kids should just do what they're asked because they should just do it. Well, unfortunately, that's really just kind of not the way life works. We all, go to our job because we get a paycheck. And those rewards, they don't have to be edible. They don't have to be food rewards. They can be something just really simple, like we said, like the tokens, where they might just enjoy earning those throughout the day. And that reward that they exchange the tokens for is just kind of like a bonus. And it can be just natural things that you can kind of embed in their day. So really kind of think about that if it's something that you've struggled with. So with that, we have time for some Q&A. So Carla, I'm going to spend a couple minutes actually reading your question. So yeah, I think Carla, what you're sharing, the difficulty with, especially a kindergartner, they don't know the routine of school. They don't yet have an understanding of what that school routine is like. And then all of a sudden they're starting in this virtual environment. I hope some of the tips that we gave really make it easier for you. But what I would really make sure that you do is put up a schedule, a calendar that, review it with him today. Today, we are in August 11th. At the end of the day, you can cross it off with him. And then do the same thing tomorrow, and then show him where August 18th is. And, tell him that's your first day of kindergarten. And we need to be a little excited about it. You're going to go to kindergarten. That's the first day of kindergarten. And the more we kind of do that, he might be able to see the days kind of passing by and know that that day is going to start. And then once you are moving toward that day, you want to make sure that you've done some of the things we talked about, that you prepared a learning environment, that he has the technology that he needs, that he at least understands, to kind of sit in front of the technology. So you might have him watch an educational video on YouTube before the first day of school. So kind of get him familiar with, sitting in front and watching. And I know we've heard from some families that, as soon as I put the computer out in front of the kid, they're closing it, they're throwing it, they don't want to access it. So you might have to try and, start today, start tomorrow, showing it to him just a little bit at a time to get him to the point where he can access it. And then, so you're showing it to him a little bit at a time, show him some educational videos, maybe short, maybe things that are more preferred, but I wouldn't do kind of your most preferred on the school technology, because he may then just want to go and watch, his favorite cartoons on YouTube and not access his education. But if we show him this device is for school, then he might, be able to make that distinction a little bit better. And then you may want to actually try some Zoom sessions with him so that he can see himself on camera. I know a lot of kids are having trouble with that too. So if you can set up a Zoom with a friend, or a Zoom with a close relative, or just someone that's willing to kind of do that with you, so you can do it in a slow way and introduce that to him so he can kind of understand what that's like. So doing test Zooms during ABA at home, that's great. Those are the kind of things that you really should start doing. So not interested at all. And they're, if we don't keep trying to expose them to it, then they're really just going to continue to not be interested. So if we can do things that help them develop an interest, and that's why I said I had another student who wasn't interested and would just close it. We had parents do some sessions with his best friends, so he could see one or two of his friends and gain an interest in it that way. And it, maybe it feels safer, or it's easier, or it's more preferred before we then transition into school. So it sounds like you have, number one, some in-home support, which I think is really great. And number two, it sounds like you've done some of the things already that you need to do to be ready for that school day. Now, is everything going to work out great and wonderful? Probably not. But, use the tips that you've heard here today to try to make it as successful as possible. Another thing is, maybe you need to start with rewards. So if he sits on Zoom for 2 minutes, he gets, whatever that is, a raisin, a goldfish cracker. I mean, it might have to be an edible, because some kids, that's where you have to start. And, give him one every 2 minutes that he sits in front of it, or every minute if that's what's needed. Don't give him 40 goldfish for 1 minute, but if you give him 1 or 2, then you can space them out for a longer, time. And maybe he just, that's how you start getting him to sit in front of it. But I'm sure those in-home supports can really help you devise a plan to work on that. So hopefully that helps. I know it's really tough. I know, again, parents have been tasked with like the hardest challenge ever. And so I know that it's a really difficult time, but hopefully some of the tips will help. We have some time for other questions. Does anybody have any other questions? You can type them in the chat, or you can put them in the Q&A. Victoria or Kathleen, did anything come up to you, or you want to share additional resources?
Well, a couple of thoughts. I did want to share one idea, is that not an idea for sitting in front of Zoom, but we know that this is difficult for students and for family members. And I think it's important that parents try to engage their kids with distance learning. And it's also important to document how you're attempting to do this. And you can do that a number of ways. You can keep a log by day. This day we logged on at this time. He lasted 10 minutes. At this day we logged on at this time, lasted 5 minutes. You can also take short videos to show what kinds of behaviors or what kind of response your child has to distance learning. Because, at some point at your next IEP meeting, you might need to show those to show the teachers exactly what's happening from your perspective at home. We know that, everyone's in this, having different experiences. And your experience on the first day might not be the same as your experience, 2 weeks from now or something. But I think it's important for parents to attempt to do this distance learning and to keep records of how it's going, because you'll want to have that information available to district staff during IEP meetings, or, if you need to just contact the teacher after the first week and say, listen, this is how it's going, just so they know that you are attempting it, and they might have some helpful tips for you.
Yeah, I would hope that being in close communication with the teacher would help. I really like the idea of documenting, how it's going, because just going back to the school and saying, well, this didn't work, he wasn't interested, probably is not going to be enough. But if you have some, documentation, then they might be able to provide you with some extra assistance. Also, we're behavior support specialists at Advanced Behavioral Pathways, and part of what we do is contract with schools to provide behavioral services to students on campus. And so there are behavior specialists in every district who may be able to provide additional support with some of the behavior issues you're seeing around distance learning. So I would first reach out to the teacher, see if they can provide any help or resources, or any additional, maybe if the computer activities aren't working, can they send things home that are, more paper-based activities or other ideas that they might have, because you're not the only family who's struggling with this. So access some behavior services, and get some help from your teacher and document.
Mm-hmm.
So I've heard of NPSs are doing distance learning more thoroughly or effectively than the school districts. I will say, I don't have a lot of information about that. And I think it's, so an NPS is a non-public school. Those are typically specialized schools that serve students that receive special education services. And I think that some schools and some classrooms transitioned really well to it and are doing it fairly well. And I'm sure that there are some that are also really struggling. So I don't have a great answer to that. And I think right now too, it may be really difficult to transition to an NPS if you weren't already placed with an NPS, simply because everyone's struggling with meeting the needs of their current student population, and it might be even more difficult to bring in a new student. But not to say that you can't discuss that with your IEP team. I definitely would if that's something that you're considering.
Michelle, did you see the question regarding virtual mainstreaming?
Oh, yeah. So I would again go back to that SDC teacher and ask them what their options are for mainstreaming. Is there a class that they would ordinarily go to if they were on campus that they can be mainstreamed with for part of that virtual learning every week? So I think, again, that's going to have to be like a case by case, ask the teacher what the options are for that, especially if that's already part of the IEP, is that there's mainstreaming involved, then they are doing their best to meet IEPs. So if that's part of his IEP, then I would definitely ask what the options are going to be for that. But I think it's going to be the same thing like we would do in a typical mainstream, is that the student would go to that class for a part of their day. It's probably going to be offered to go to the virtual class for that gen ed mainstreaming. And if the virtual experience is if you're really struggling with that, it might be difficult.
I have a question that came up on a meeting I was on earlier today, where a parent shared that her son was not responding well to the idea of school being on the computer. And she said, I think it's because to him, school is a place that you go, and he's not going to a place. And she said, maybe I should think of another name to give this. Instead of saying you're going to go to school, it's time for school, say something like, it's time for computer time with your teacher, or computer time with your class, or something like that, to indicate that it's, learning time, but it's not school. You're not going to school. That was the part that he was not accepting.
Yeah, so calling it something like computer learning, or I know one parent was just calling it time with Mrs. Smith, or the teacher's name. And that was helpful. Another idea would be too to bring in some of that school feel. So like I shared that visual support that kind of had something from Helmer's Huskies. Can you print the school logo and put it in the distance learning area or on the computer? So it's you're kind of tying those things together. You're bringing some of that school into the home besides just the computer. That might help too. Right. And I know a lot of students get really connected to their school, and the mascots, and the some schools have their own little songs, and so any of that stuff that your student likes that you can bring into the
Pledge
the
of
home
Allegiance,
environment.
or say the Pledge of Allegiance. Have your lunch break. Yeah.
And that's why we're really wanting parents to do a morning routine that's similar to school. you know, so they're getting their materials ready, they're getting dressed, they're eating breakfast, they're getting ready for that virtual learning just as they would their regular school day. Because if you're not doing all of those other activities, then it doesn't seem like you're going to school. So,
Right. Yeah,
so hopefully that helps.
I hope so too. It's a challenging time. I mean, none of us thought we would be here when this first started back in March. So I give parents a lot of credit for trying to make all this work, and teachers too.
And I'm going to go ahead and put my email address in the chat. If anyone has, you know, other questions or you want to talk more at length about something, I'd be happy to answer those questions.
Very good. Thank you, Michelle. So we'd like to remind everybody that the next session, which is about problem solving, as she shows right here on the screen, is 2 weeks from today on the 25th, also at 3 o'clock. And we will put this presentation up on our website, and I'll send an email out to all the people that registered for this webinar with that information, so you can look at it later if you'd like to.
Great. We're looking forward to presenting that problem solving. We're going to be really working with a lot of the students and families and teachers that we support. And we're going to gather all those problems, and we're going to bring them back with some tips and suggestions. So we're hoping that'll be really helpful.
Yeah. And if you know, anyone has any problems that they're having and they want to shoot me an email, my name and email address is probably on the registration email that you received. If you want to submit questions ahead of time, that would be welcome.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay. Okay,
Carla
everybody.
said thank you, and she appreciated it. It was very helpful.
Oh, thanks, Carla. We're glad you're here. Thanks, everybody, for signing on. Thank you, Michelle, Kathleen.
Thank you,
And
Michelle.
we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.